heartbroken mother of a soldier held captive by Hamas terrorists wept over her daughter's coffin today after the 19-year-old and another hostage were found dead in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital complex. Joining us live from Tel Aviv is journalist Jotam Confino. Jotam, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Maybe we should start with those unbelievably affecting pictures of the mother, obviously, stricken by the most agonizing grief, weeping over the coffin of her lost daughter. I mean, it's agonizing to watch, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think a lot of families in Israel who still have their loved ones held hostage by Hamas in Gaza are increasingly worried now about what will happen to them, because to find two bodies within 24 hours is not a good sign, really. And we're on day 42, if I'm not mistaken now, since October 7th. And many of these people, we still don't know if they're even alive. Hamas has said that more than 50 of them have been killed in airstrikes. We also don't know if that's true. So the psychological trauma for these families it's simply just unfolding and unraveling every single day. And every time we hear a horror story like this with a body found in Gaza, it just increases the anxiety and the worrying, really, among the families.
And we hear that the war has reached another stage, but I think for many, we're not really certain what that means. Does it simply mean geographically that it's moving further down towards the south, or does it mean it's changing its nature in any other kind of a way?
It means a couple of things. First of all, it means that Israel, at least according to the army, says it's now more or less in control with the northern part of the Gaza Strip, above ground. It's still trying to demolish some of the tunnels underneath the ground, but it's now slowly going to start shifting its focus towards southern Gaza. And the reason for that is that Hamas is everywhere in Gaza. It's not just the northern part. The reason why Israel divided Gaza into two is because it makes practical sense on an operational level. But it's going to be incredibly difficult to start operating in southern Gaza, given that most people who live in Gaza are now in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And they can't go back to the northern part because it's bombarded. Most of the houses are either damaged or in ruins. So the next phase will be incredibly difficult. I don't really know what the Israeli army is planning here, because they need to do something with the civilians. They can't conduct the same kind of operations they did in the northern part, in the southern part, with so many civilians caught in simply just this atrocious war.
I mean, it's utterly devastating, obviously, for both sides. With every casualty, there's another stricken family, there's another heartbroken mother, devastated children, devastated parents. It's agonizing to watch. Whatever your perspective, these are all human beings, and it's a hideous human tragedy. It's one litany of misery after another, obviously. Do we know anything at all about the level of progress that Israel thinks it has made so far in terms of doing what it says it set out to do, which is to eradicate Hamas?
We do know. First of all, the Israeli Air Force commander, the chief of the Air Force, said that Israel had killed thousands of Hamas terrorists. Now, we know that one of the stated goals is to eradicate Hamas physically, which means killing as many Hamas members as possible. So in that sense, Israel has achieved some sort of a goal. It's also assassinated dozens of senior Hamas commanders. It's demolished hundreds of tunnel shafts, openings of tunnels. It's found lots of course, anti-tank missiles, weapons, and it's taken control with Hamas headquarters in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. So from an operational point of view, Israel has succeeded somewhat. But again, there's a whole southern part of the Gaza Strip that remains not untouched, because Israel has struck parts of the southern Gaza Strip. But some in Israel are starting to speculate that the leadership might actually be hiding in tunnels in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, which means that the fighting will be extremely intense in that area. So you could say that it has succeeded in some of its goals, but it's not even halfway, I would say.
Some spokespeople have alleged that Israel has not exerted itself as vigorously, as zealously as it could have done in protecting Palestinian civilian lives. What do you know about the measures that Israel has taken to help save civilian life in Gaza?
Well, we know for a fact that from day one, more or less, Israel started, first of all, not encouraging, but more or less ordering civilians to leave the northern part of the Gaza Strip. It has continued to do so for 6 weeks now. So in some sense, it is, of course, trying to remove civilians from these areas. We know that for a fact. We see huge lines of people walking in what appears to be relatively safe corridors from the north to the south. So that's one thing. And second of all, it is calling, simply picking up the phone and calling civilians and telling them this area will be bombarded in the next 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever it might be, to give them a warning. So all these warning signs, that's a clear indication of Israel trying to protect the civilians. Now, that's the positive element of this. Could Israel have bombarded less aggressively? Obviously. If it hadn't bombed so aggressively, less people would have been killed. So this is it's a gray zone, and it really depends on how you look at it. If you're thinking that Israel should not kill any civilians, then Israel has really, really not done a good job, clearly. If you're thinking that eradicating Hamas for Israel would be okay as long as it just goes after anyone who's close to Hamas, then Israel has done a fairly good job in really killing a lot of Hamas members. So there's a gray zone here, and especially also when it comes to talking about the word genocide. That's something we need to leave for the criminal courts to investigate. It's not something that you and I can just make a conclusion about here. It's something that has to be left for the experts. But again, if Israel wanted to go after civilians, I can guarantee you that many, many more people would have been killed so far.
I mean, you could say that if a country or a regime is attempting genocide, which is the eradication of an entire race, a whole people, then that country would not begin by saying, evacuate your homes, this is going to be dangerous, move away from the bombs, move south, giving out leaflets, phoning individual families, as you say, making phone calls. You would, and having regular ceasefires or pauses in atrocities or pauses in fighting on a daily basis to give people in that country the chance to move to safety. You might say that a genocide is the absolute opposite of that. A genocide is a country taking every possible opportunity to eradicate as many people of that country's population as it likes. I mean, we're certainly not aware, as Russia invaded Ukraine, of hearing that Russia phoned various people in various cities and said, right, vacate, come out of your apartment block, move out of here, or gave warning, made phone calls. I mean, that's not a conventional technique, even in warfare, let alone to be used by a country intent on genocide, is it?
It isn't, and I will say this again, and I've said it before. If Israel wanted to commit genocide in Gaza, it could have eradicated the entire Gaza Strip, the entire population, within 20 minutes. Israel's military is one of the strongest in the world. Gaza is a relatively small area. So if it was deliberately going after each and every possible person in Gaza, this would have been gone a long time ago. That's number one. Number two, if it was up to Israel, it would take 2 million Palestinians, move them away from the Gaza Strip, and fight Hamas and Islamic Jihad just face to face. That would be the ideal situation for Israel, because it could also be done with it within a week, probably. Obviously, population transfer is extremely controversial. So I'm not arguing that that should be done. I'm just saying that's Israel's ideal option, is to get all of these people out of the way, bombard Gaza, where Hamas and Islamic Jihad are hiding, and then get the people back and start rebuilding. But it's not so simple. And we see that also because Egypt has absolutely no interest in allowing Palestinians into the Sinai Desert. They've actually said, we will do anything to protect our sovereignty. We do not want Palestinians to start resettling or even seeking shelter for an indefinite time in the Sinai Desert.
Are you surprised that some of the marchers, obviously pro-Palestine, many of them emphatically and heartfeltly, passionately in favor of peace. Are you surprised they're not marching to say that they're marching A, against Hamas, and B, to entreat Egypt to welcome its brethren, to give them a chance of escaping to safety, at least temporarily? Are you surprised that there doesn't seem to be a kind of international voice raised saying to Egypt, help, help out in the way that Poland did when Russia invaded Ukraine? Polish borders just opened wide straight away. Families opened their homes and nobody knew how long Ukrainians were going to be there, but they didn't even hesitate for even 1 minute to let them come and save their lives. Are you surprised there's a kind of pretty much international silence on this?
I would say yes and no. I'm surprised that more countries have not made a bigger effort to make sure that there is more here to this situation than just Israel bombarding Gaza. There's Egypt that is literally, there's a siege from the Egyptian side and they don't want people in. Despite their rhetoric, despite their support of the Palestinians, they don't want to have anything to do with them. And they should be pressured much more. That's number one. But number two is something else I wanted to also mention, is the fact that there are 239 hostages. I don't remember the last time there were so many hostages kept by a terrorist organization, which caused so little international uproar. Maybe Boko Haram is a good example also of that. But this is a very unique situation where you have countless nationalities, Brits, Americans, Thais. Why are these people who are marching, why aren't they marching for the release of their brethren, their citizens? It's something that's quite astonishing. It's not one hostage, it's 239, including babies. So I'm quite surprised that this has not gotten more attention, really. And I'm also surprised that what happened on October 7th is still somewhat becoming a footnote and even being ridiculed by people like George Galloway, who has the audacity to call it more or less a lie, what has been said, that there weren't that many people killed, most of them weren't civilians, rape didn't happen. It's modern day Holocaust denial. And I'm quite shocked that there's not more outrage about this, because it's so overwhelming, the evidence of what happened on October 7th. So I'm surprised on many levels.
Jotam,
Long answer short.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much for being on the program.